Alright there, Kabane. Alright, everybody else. In this video I'm going to work from a pre-prepared script. I don't usually do that, but I want to make some specific points and I don't want to ramble off the topic. Also, I recommend people watch my previous video and Kabane's previous video so that everyone knows what we're talking about. To make this chat easier to follow, I'm just going to make my points in several numbers. I'm going to go point 1, blah blah blah, point 2, blah blah blah. Okay, so, point 1. James and Paul's testimonies may have different data supporting them, but it's still one point, Kabane. Some skeptics saw the risen Jesus and converted. But to be honest, I feel neither you nor me wants to get hung up on this point too much, as it's not important. I mean, my real point was that in saying you have 5 lines of argument is more rhetorically impressive than saying you have 4 lines of argument, which you in fact do have. You only have 4 lines of argument. But anyway. Point 2. I understand now, watching your new video, slightly more subtly, your points are quote, wanting to see Jesus. However, it's still true that James and Peter's being skeptics and seeing Jesus arisen doesn't really impact much on the reality of whether Jesus did in fact arise from the dead. Point 3a. My, quote, skeptics deep down believing, end quote, point was not me positing that this is actually what happened with Paul and James. Okay, and I was clear about that. What I was doing was showing you that just because you are skeptical of something doesn't mean that on some level you don't want to believe it, okay? Point 3b. Now, in your latest video you say, Paul wouldn't kill the believers if deep down he secretly believed. I think you're misunderstanding me. What if it was subconscious? What if their desire was subconscious? I mean, that was my point, really. It doesn't have to be the concealing anything. I mean, back to my Ted Haggard example, many people will act contrary to their concealed or even subconscious desires. And that's widely known. So, I don't take your point. And no, my point isn't a dumb one. If you want to show, Tommy, that people never act contrary to their hidden or subconscious desires, then feel free. Point 4a. Yeah, good fooling. I love the way you emphasised your pronunciation of Fatima, to show that I had stressed it wrong. But Fatima is the way I've heard other people pronouncing it. I mean, it's possible you're correct and it's Fatima. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know I found that amusing and it humoured me. So yeah, touche. Point 4b. About group hallucinations. I thank you for quoting from a book on the subject. Pretty much the first thing in your psychology quote was a point I made myself. The expectation is the key point in group hallucination. I didn't specifically use the term expectation, but that was what I was referring to. I talked about people being primed, already believers, being excited, waiting for the miracle they were told would occur, etc. As to the rest of your extract, it supports and confirms my examples are either fakeness of the Fatima miracle of the sun. You also agree with me on this, which is funny because it's another example of the Catholic Church, which seems to recognise the miracle of the sun being full of crud. So we have common cause there. Anyway, but my point was, of course, by using the miracle of the sun example, was to show that group hallucinations far grander than those which supposedly support the notion that Jesus rose from the dead do and can happen. And we can show that what these people experience are not accurate representations of reality. So why would we assume it was in the case of Jesus? Jesus' resurrection. Now, you make the interesting point, quoting from that book, that 3 criteria must be fulfilled for group hallucinations. Expectation, excitement, and the people involved must be informed beforehand. You quote Mark chapter 9 verses 31 to 32, John chapter 20 verse 9, and Luke chapter 18 verses 33 to 34 as scriptural evidence that the group hallucination theory does not hold with any of the three criteria we established a minute ago, i.e. is the group hallucination theory isn't applicable to the gospel account of Jesus' resurrection. However, as you point out in these verses, Jesus does say he would arise. So in fact, his followers were informed beforehand, even if they claimed to not understand Jesus' words. It doesn't matter, they were informed beforehand. They were also informed by the ladies who came running from the tomb. Now, also, when the ladies went running from the tomb, gabbing on, they created excitement and expectation that Jesus would be seen. So, yes, you point out, though, that not everyone succumbed to this mania, as some of the apostles didn't believe. I mean, for instance, Matthew chapter 28, verse 17. But that isn't the point. The point is the three criteria are fulfilled, and I have just demonstrated that. The excitement, the expectation, and being informed beforehand are fulfilled. Point 4c. I made the point in my video about the credulity of many of the witnesses. Well, the Gospels account for this themselves. Matthew chapter 16 verses 13 to 14 says the following. When Jesus came to the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Now this pretty much conclusively shows the credulity of people, and therefore how can we take their views as gospel, so to speak, on the issue of Jesus rising from the dead. Point 5. About your guards point, as I said in my own video, Tommy, I wasn't trying to make an argument on that point. I was really asking for clarification for what your point was, because as I say, you were kind of mumbling and I couldn't understand what you were saying, so forget that. Point 6a. You say that I said that the disciples could have pretended to have believed to get the message across. So why didn't they say he was just a great teacher, you ask me? Well, because that wouldn't get the message across, would it? That's why. C.S. Lewis makes this point in a rather famous quotation in his book Mere Christianity. You're probably aware of it, most people are. He says, either Jesus was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. And he goes on and says, one thing we mustn't do is just say he was a great teacher. Now, whether you buy Lewis's argument or not, many people do buy his argument. Hence, I feel it's applicable to the point you make. Point 6b. And, of course, you seem to have missed my point anyway, Tommy. I recommend you take a look at some of Dan Dennett's works. I mentioned him in my previous video. I said it's possible his disciples could have believed in belief in certain propositions, e.g. that Jesus rose from the dead. If they believed in belief in these propositions, for them to say, oh, he didn't really rise from the dead, defeats the objective, obviously. By definition, it defeats the objective. Because then people, won't believe. If they believe in belief, they're not going to undermine people's belief, are they? So they had to profess belief, at least. And perhaps this doesn't necessarily involve cognitive dissonance or mental partitioning on their part. It is possible that they believe the propositions to some degree by force of their own belief in belief. It's a tricky, complicated subject, but I don't feel, Tommy, that you dealt with my points in any case. Indeed, you just dismissed them out of hand. I'm not even sure you understood my points. I hope I've made it more lucid.